Today, discussing audit inefficiencies and their resolution. Please help me in welcoming Kyle Starkey.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, so my name is Kyle Starkey. I am the CISO. For those of you who still haven't gotten any food, save me some, because I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to talk about audit inefficiencies and their resolution. I gave this talk in Charlotte, North Carolina for Secure World earlier in the year, and there was a fairly good-sized buzz about some of the conversations I'm having here. I'll be interested to see how much of this affects you guys here in the Silicon Valley. I think it will be pertinent, but I'd be interested to know. So. There we go. All right. So here we're going to do, this is our discussion topics. Who am I? Why do you care? What's the problem? Inefficiencies abound. How do we solve this? Inside, outside, come at it like a spider monkey. Okay, so as Carrie told you, I've been doing this 15 plus years. I grew up here in the Silicon Valley in Belmont, California, on the peninsula. I grew up hacking phone systems. I grew up hacking voicemail systems. I grew up building blue boxes and red boxes and having Captain Crunch whistles and all sorts of fun stuff. I've been at this for quite some time. I'm currently the CISO. I own policy, compliance, technology, and the physical aspects of security for early warning, as well as the facility because it's so tightly combined. Recent past, I worked for some programmable digital logic manufacturers, some online trading, as Carrie said. I was a security consultant for 8+ years, worked in e-commerce, did some pen testing, was a QSA. I trained under the best. I know some of the mavens in this industry, and I'm happy to call them friends and mentors. So in the distant past, like I said, BBSs, alligator clips, and phone punching, and war dialing and Vmail hacking. So yes, I'm the pointy-haired boss, but I used to live in the trenches, and I still do. Okay, so what's the problem, right? Our problem is that we currently spend way too much time explaining how we're compliant and not enough time actually being secure, right? We got customers who audit me, right? I get the federal government, I got financial institutions, compliance bodies, third-party auditors, and then you have to audit your suppliers, right? You have to go out and make sure that any data or communication you're having with your own third parties, Iron Mountain, Salesforce, ADP, I feel quite sure that, most of the people in this room probably at some point have been involved in, or their companies have been involved in, an audit of Iron Mountain, right? Which is why Iron Mountain hates us all. The data center, right? Do we have to audit the plant watering guy? We got a guy that shows up that waters the plants in my building, and because he has unfettered access to my building and has a badge, I got to do a background screen and a whiz quiz on this poor guy. He's just trying to water the plants. So we're trying to figure out, this is the problem I want to solve, and I think I'm actually doing a pretty good job at it at early warning. I want to actually give you my approach, have some conversation about it, tell me what you guys think, and we'll go from there. All right. So, anybody disagree with this? Compliance does not equal security. Compliance is great, and if you're secure and you implement base security practices, 99% of the time, you will actually end up being compliant. Being compliant does not make you secure, right? It helps, the bodies are there and the frameworks are there to make sure that you're doing the right thing, but they really are based for the lowest common denominator, right? The PCI DSS shouldn't be your high watermark. I understand some of you guys have been in business longer than I have been doing this, and you've got antiquated systems or legacy systems that you built 15 years ago when there was no audit requirements, but the base security problems haven't changed, at least in the 15 years I've been here, except for some of the implementations, right? You still want to do least access principle. You still want to, mitigate and remove systems from those people who don't need access to them. All right, so my experience with this compliance and audit issue. We are currently in our second year of PCI DSS Level 1. Does anybody know what a TPA is? I was a QSA for a number of years, and I was also a QIRA. When my QSA showed up and said, "Oh, you guys are a TPA," I said, "What are you talking about? Where does it say anything about that?" I called Visa. They had some different opinions on who is and what is. Some of their documentation was weak. If you work at Visa, I'm sorry, but not sorry that you work there, but I'm sorry for berating you. But we ended up being a third-party agent. This requires us to have one of our contributing banks register us as a TPA. Any financial institution or any institution that gives us card data is supposed to go to Visa and actually register us at the Visa website. So that when we get breached, Visa can tell everybody else, "Hey, by the way, you guys have been giving data to Kyle, and he just had his ass hanging in the wind, so maybe you should do something about that." We have to go through NIST 853. We self-attest to be substantially compliant. We do some business with the federal government, so we have some systems where we have to deal with this sort of thing. It's not a huge deal. Again, it's sort of low-hanging fruit. We do SOC 2 Type 2. SOC 2 Type 1, some of you guys are doing, it's the replacement of the SAS 70. SOC 2 Type 2 is a much more prescriptive audit framework, right? The SAS 70 always said, "Oh, well, you work with KPMG or whoever, and you say, well, what's my audit framework?" Well, I'll audit to make sure that all of my computers are brown. And if you actually go into the data center and all the computers are brown, you pass. Well, that's not real prescriptive, and it doesn't really tell me anything about your security, but it says you have a passing SAS 70. The SOC 2 Type 2 is more like the DSS, more like FISMA, where it actually outlines the requirements. We're again doing our second year this year. 3 of the five disciplines with only minor findings, and all the findings were remediated. That is actually unheard of in the SOC 2 Type 2 world. Very few people get out their first year with no findings, so I'm pretty excited about that. I have 900 plus customers, all of them financial institutions within the United States. They all have audit rights. Eeh. About 15% of them actually exercise them. I would base that mostly on the fact that their third-party audit maturity is not that high. The OCC and the CFPB are hammering those guys pretty hard right now, so I expect this number to climb in the next few years. We get less than about 5% of these guys come on site every year. So you figure that's about 40 to 45 financial institutions that want to come on site and audit to some framework that they either made up or that they've decided is the best way to go about it, and we have to comply. And then finally, HIPAA, there were some changes in the rules of HIPAA recently, and we are now a business associate. I'm still fighting that one with my legal team. They don't believe me. They have some outside counsel that they paid $900 an hour, and the outside counsel said, "Yes, absolutely, I'm a HIPAA expert, and you have to be HIPAA compliant." My problem is that HIPAA actually requires you to know something about the patient, as well as know something about that patient's health. I have enough data in my databases that I probably know every account number, every SSN, every home address, every information that you would give to your financial offices or your financial institutions are in my database. So I know probably everything about you guys. I don't know how healthy you are. I don't have any idea. So I'm fighting that right now. But we deal with these base frameworks on a regular basis. All right, so C-Tech Astronomy. Anybody get this reference? This is from Hackers, not Hackers, the Robert Redford film was here in San Francisco that I'm now blanking on. Anyways, it comes out to be too many secrets. The DSS, they ask so many questions, right? 225 plus controls. Third-party QSA required. QSA structure is wrong. You are paying your QSA to tell you that you're compliant. Anybody see a problem with that, right? And I don't know if anybody's been through the QSA training. It's 2 days. It's absolutely worthless. The number of people who have gone through there, I actually had to go through it 3 separate times because I let my QSA lapse. because I was on the road doing consulting work and didn't get back to do my, my one-day test or whatever. So I have had a number of QSAs through my organization, and some of them are good, some of them are not. NIST 853, 160 plus controls. Compliance requires a third-party NIST-approved auditor. Okay. SOC 2, 350 controls. Attestation and testing requires a third party, i.e. KPMG. Customer audits. I see 200 to 500 questions at a time, and they show up all year round, right? Plus they want to come on site, plus they last a bazillion years, and they ask one set of questions, and then 3 months later come back and ask another set of questions, or one line of business asks me the 500 questions, and then we go do business with another line of business, and they ask another 500 questions, and it's killing me, okay? So the SIG, I don't know if you guys are aware of BITS-SIG. It's something that the financial institutions put together a number of years ago to solve this problem. They all got on board and said, we're going to create BITS-SIG, and this is fantastic, and the AUP, and it's great, except for none of the financial institutions actually accept it, which sucks. And then HIPAA, you got to go through these requirements, and then GLBA has a whole bunch of other requirements as well. So the issue here is that, if you're like me, or even partially like me, you may have 2 or 3 major audit cycles a year. That doesn't include your customer audits, that doesn't include your third-party audits of you auditing your third party. So, how are we going to solve it, right? You got to start internally. No one else will know you if you don't know yourself, right? Sit down, ask these questions, understand where you are compliant and where you are not. Don't make value judgments on yourself or your team based on your compliance requirements, right? Make them based on security requirements, but understand where you're going to be compliant and where you're not. Get off the old frameworks, guys. Stop delivering SAS 70. Nobody cares anymore. Well, I don't care anymore. Somebody may. Long live SOC 2. Go to more prescriptive control sets. Get ahead of the curve. Move to the outside. This is something that security folks in general, as a whole, I think, don't do really well. You got to be a little bit more salesy. Work with your auditors to be more efficient, right? Go out and actually talk to your auditors before they get there. Have a rational conversation with them. We're going to get into Audit Palooza, Audit Festivus. This is something I coined for my organization. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then charge more for inefficient or additional requirements. Go sit with your business organization and say, listen, sales guy, if you sell this product to XYZ financial firm or XYZ, high security 3-letter agency, they're going to come at me with 1 million questions. Make sure that your sales organization and your, C-suite understands the increasing cost of that, right? And then finally, risk acceptance. Accept risk and move on. Sometimes it's not worth fixing it. So we'll dig in here. Internal changes, all right? So sometimes change takes time, right? You gotta be involved in the contract process. You gotta make sure that you understand what agreements are actually in play and what contractual requirements you're being put under by your sales organization or by your C-suite from a compliance standpoint, right? Adjust the boundaries, either larger or smaller, to get more efficient. I now sit on the team that reviews all sales contracts for all incoming customers and all renegotiation thereof. It takes a lot of my time, but it's a whole lot more efficient for me to sit their head end than it is for me to accept their crazy audit requirements and then every year have to spend my time and 10 of my staff's time to deal with this sort of problem, right? So, adjust the audit boundaries. Have rational conversations with the security people on the other end of that conversation, right? So if I'm out negotiating with Bank of America, don't talk to the lawyer at Bank of America. The lawyer at Bank of America only wants to make sure that you comply with the pre-written statement. Have them bring in some security practitioner at the other end that has the right to say yes or no. Have a rational security to security person conversation. That makes it so much easier. Work smarter, not harder, right? And merge. Merge these compliance frameworks together. There's a product called Unified Compliance Framework. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It gets you about 80% of the way there. They got a whole bunch of different compliance frameworks. They merge them all together. They show you the binding. PCI DSS Section 3 is the same as NIST 853 Section 4 or whatever, right? We use Allgress. Sorry, plug for my friends at Allgress. And then if you have to, brute force the framework merging. You guys are smart security individuals. You know when they're asking about wireless in DSS, they're going to ask about wireless in the NIST framework. They're going to ask about wireless in the SOC 2. Go find all those control sets and stuff them together. I took 5 of my owner banks. They all gave me their audit question sets. Ended up being about 1,500 questions. I merged those all together by hand and then wrote them a little secret decoder ring so nobody knew whose questions was whose, because they were concerned about, well, if I ask questions about wireless, it'll tell something about my security at my bank. Well, come on, get over yourself. So, and I had that conversation with my auditors of the banks, so I'm not saying anything out of turn here. The other thing you need to do internally, you got to adjust and remember, right? So you got to meta tag your policies and procedures. When you're writing policies and procedures, at the bottom of the policy and procedure, just write PCI DSS section 6.4, right? In the notes somewhere. So that when the PCI guy shows up, you can go, here's all my policy, look for this annotation, thanks very much. Document your test the first year. The first year is always the most painful, right? The first time you're going through the DSS, the first time you're going through 853, the first time you're going through SOC 2, you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to figure out how to get the auditors what they need. Write it down. Make sure you write the exact script you ran. I talked to Bob. Bob ran ls-ltr pipe grep GUI and output this, out this came. Okay, great. Write that stuff down so the next year when you do it, you can just go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, this is what you ran last year. This is what we decided on. Can you do this again? Bob will say, ls-ltr pipe GUI, where do you want the output? If you can script these tests, that's even better. We use Splunk pretty heavily in my organization. We deliver custom apps to all of our servers to do a lot of our custom auditing for us. And I wrote some very, very ugly shell scripts to do some of this stuff for me and stuffed it into Splunk. Great. But you can do that with GPO. You can do that with rsync of scripts directories. There's 1,000 ways to solve the problem, but script it if you can. And finally, reuse what you used last year. So in year 1 of your DSS review, this is what you said. Okay. In year 2, go back to your year 1 results and pull it out and say, yep, this still looks good. Here you go, right? You got to get more efficient. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time. So framework graveyard, get out of the old frameworks. I talked about this a little bit already. SAS 70 versus SOC 2, I gave you guys a quick primer on that up front. Know the difference. Be able to speak eloquently about, with your auditors about the framework he or she are asserting your compliance to. Something else that's kind of fun is auditors are really more aware of the old framework. A lot of the guys that come out and see me, they show up at one different site once a month. They've got 1,000 different vendors that they have to audit. They go through the same thing over and over again, right? So they get a little stuck in their framework. Most of these folks do it for a living. If you use the old framework, the person asking questions will probably already have a script. You must do X. Well, if you're not going to pass X, push him to the new framework and see if you can't get him a little out of his comfort zone. Maybe he'll give you a buy. The other nice thing about it is, hey, look, I'm trying to get onto the new framework. Can we call this a low this year? I understand I'm not compliant. Can we call this a moderate risk this year? With the understanding that over the next 12 months, the next time you get here, Mr. Auditor, if I still haven't done this, we'll call it a high next year, but I'm trying to get onto the new framework. A lot of the time, I find that works really well. The auditors are like, great, I understand. We'll try and get, we'll try and get you some support. Embrace the new, right? It shows movement rather than stagnated death. If you are, still on DSS, 1.0, and you haven't been looking at 2.0, or you're on the SAS 70, or you're on a SIG version that's version 5, they're going to think you should know what you're doing. I point out here, if you're running and you fall down, no one laughs and points. If you're shuffling along at snuffleupagus speed and you fall, then it's funny, right? So be aware of that. All right. This one's more really what I'm concerned about with the security industry. Most of us are not real extroverts. A lot of the best people I know, I would never put in front of a customer. The people that do the best security work I know, I would never ask to stand on this stage because they'd stand here quietly whimpering. You put them behind a terminal, these people can do wondrous, magical things. So you got to get outside of your comfort zone or find somebody in your organization that is a little bit more extroverted, right? Meet your auditors before they show up. Press the flesh, right? Go to the conferences you think they're going to be at. Spend your time with them before they get there, because now you're not an adversarial relationship. Hey, this is a drinking buddy. Fantastic. We get to go spend time a couple of days with the drinking buddy, and we're going to answer and ask some questions, and it's okay. Remember, they're people too. They're just trying to do their job. A lot of them don't have the option to make changes to the frameworks that they're being asked to do, right? The QSAs have a lot of leverage. If you are nice to them, you will find that, they may give you a little bit more leverage. Now, this goes back to the security is not compliance or compliance is not security, right? Just because you're DSS compliant doesn't mean you're not going to get rooted next week. We've seen that over and over again. Sometimes audit, legal, security issues can be handled by just finding the right person and having a one-on-one conversation. I do this all the time. Every time my salesperson comes in and says, hey, Kyle, we got a new customer, it's $100 million of business, I said, great. Where's their CISO's contact information? Well, we don't need it. This is going to fly through. No. I need senior security staff. I need the CISO contact information. This is your job, sales guy. I am here to help you make sure that this process goes faster. So help me by putting me in contact with the right people so when it all gets ugly, I can make a phone call to the guy that I talked to at the beginning and say, hey, man, I know we talked a few weeks ago. It looks like we're getting bogged down in some contract stuff here. Maybe you and I can hash it out. Get salesy. Appeal to their cost avoidance side. Hey, you don't really want to audit us. We're good. We're secure. Look, here's our SOC 2 Type 2. Here's our DSS attestation. It's going to cost you guys $15,000 to come out and audit us for the week. You don't really want to pay that. I'm sure you've got other people that are much more crazy with your data. We do it right here, try that angle. Other option, appeal to their risk ranking side. Hey, listen, I know you guys do business with, ABC Pet Food Company, and I heard that they've got their credit card information just sitting on a thumb drive somewhere. You don't really want to talk to us. We got crypto, we got, real law sections here, we've got, policies and procedures and all the rest of this. We are a low risk issue. Try it. Sometimes it works. When all else fails, throw a party. This is my mantra, by the way. When all else fails, throw a party. Audit's like a Band-Aid. You got to pull it off all at once. I put together, for my major FIs, something I call Audit Festivus or Audit Palooza, right? I bring all 5 audit organizations, all 5 of these banks, into my site in March in Scottsdale when it's gorgeous, and I say, come on out and do the audit in March. You'll be here with your peers. We can all audit together. It'll be a big old party. Tell your management that this is how you're going to solve this problem, and oh, by the way, you're going to need money for dinner and drinks 3 or 4 nights while they're here, and explain to him or her how much cheaper that is than your staff or your coworkers answering audit questions from these 5 banks from now until the end of the year. If you buy dinner and drinks, it'll be cheaper, right? This is what we ended up doing. It worked out brilliantly. We had 4 of my 5 major banks last year. I think I'm probably going to have more like 10 this year. I think I'm going to run into more of the issue with the number of people in a room than I am about the question sets. The questions are all the same. Everybody asks the same question. Do you guys have wireless? Yeah. Is it in the production environment where there's credit cards? No. Do you guys use? No. Okay, cool, next. Right? But they all ask those questions, right? They're all required to do so. So find a way to get all of these frameworks, all of these questionnaires, and merge them together, and then say, hey, you know what? You asked me 300 questions. This other bank over here asked me 500. I'm going to give you the answers to all 500 questions, and you're going to look like a rock star because you got more answers than you had questions. Awesome. Now, the other thing this does, this makes you look full open kimono. Okay? I use this term a lot, open kimono. If I was in better shape, it'd be a better visual for all you guys. But I don't lie to anybody. I don't want to lie to anybody. You know, if you got security issues, the auditor needs to know. The auditor will help you to get money, staffing, push from the C-suite. Say, you know what, auditor, you're right. We use WEP in prod, and we send a bunch of credit card data over it. And I've been banging my head trying to get some new equipment for the last 3 years, but no one will give it to me because it costs money. When it becomes an audit item and a business unit decides, oh, you know what, I can't buy your product, I can't do business with you anymore, now there's real cost. They go, oh, there's $100 million of revenue coming in versus, you know, $35,000 in new, Cisco wireless gear. Yeah, Kyle, go buy Cisco wireless gear and we'll keep this $100 million in rev. Great. All right. This one is actually something that we've done very recently. Because we offer the SIG, our attestation for DSS 2.0, our attestation of the NIST 853 requirements, we offer all of our 100 level policies, we offer the responses to our SIG version 7 in what I call the ASR, which is the Annual Security Report. We send it out to any customer that has an NDA or asks for it, okay? If you want to do something else, you're welcome to do so, but it's $2,000 to have us answer one of your custom questionnaires. It's $10,000 if you want to come on site and ask us a bunch of questions. Now, for most of these large financial institutions, $10,000 is a drop in the bucket, right? They don't really care. But the issue is it goes back to the business unit who's doing business with you, and you now have an advocate on your side to say, hey, really? I don't want to spend 10 grand so that you can, you know, get your security questionnaires answered. They told me they gave you all this data. Why don't you just figure this out on all the data they gave you? It works. It's fantastic. Now, we have a few customers who still, you know, pay the $10,000, but that $10,000 comes back into my budget, and I'm allowed to use it for, you know, increasing costs. So it's great. The other thing we need to do is the changing compliance requirements have changing costs, right? 10 years ago, everybody said, okay, this is the cost of doing security, fantastic. And then the federal government came in and added, you know, their 853, OCC showed up, CFPB showed up, Visa showed up with PCI. You know, everybody shows up with their audit requirements, but we're not changing the pricing to our customers to be compliant to this. We have to do that. Because at some point, the cost of compliance is more than the actual revenue. So let's dump that particular business in the toilet, because we don't want to do it, or up the price so that people understand that, hey, you're putting these requirements on me, I'm upping the price on you. Sorry. And you need to be aware of this. And honestly, if you are aware of the increasing cost of compliance, and you can actually put that as a metric and have conversations with your financial teams and your sales teams, now you're talking about getting a seat at the table, because these are the metrics these guys talk about. Hey, every time you add a new product that has a new compliance suite, it costs me 3 FTE and, $200,000 or $300,000 in ProServe to get some third-party auditor in here to do something. If you have those metrics, those are critical. All right, this is something we don't do very well. I was very bad at it until very recently. Sometimes it's okay to say no. And you'll note that I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at Holiday Inn last night, so I'm playing one on TV. If you get proactively with your management teams and you set your risk acceptance levels, right? Make sure that the risk tolerance levels and the risk acceptance levels are such that the C-suite understands how much that costs, right? Hey, you want to be perfectly secure? Great. That's going to cost $10 million. Oh, Kyle, we're a $3 million a year company. Yeah, you just priced yourself out of the market, right? So set your risk levels to a point where people understand that they're, what they are. what risk you're accepting, what risk you're going to, say, no, we don't want to do that, and then make sure that you've got funding for it. Because if you start off day one without the funding to meet their risk tolerances, you are going to fail, and you should look for a new job. Management response, right? When an auditor comes in and says, oh, Kyle, you guys don't do this, you should do this. Be nice, but work with your management, your boss, to respond to the auditing body about what you are and are not going to do, right? Hey, you want us to have, FIPS compliant crypto? Well, I don't deal with the federal government, so I don't have to have FIPS compliant crypto. If you're requiring it, that's going to cost another $1 million. So we're going to go ahead and not do that. Sorry. But Kyle, I want to do business with you. Great. Then you need to accept the risk that I'm not using FIPS compliant crypto. It's easy. It's not that hard. You also have to formally accept the risk. Sometimes the business wants to run down the street with its hair on fire. And if it's $100 million in rev and you want to run down the street naked with your hair on fire, I'm going to run behind you with a fire extinguisher. But I'm going to let you do it because I like my bonus and I like to get paid. So if you don't believe it's an issue, you don't think it needs to be fixed, go talk to the business and say, listen, this is a risk we're going to do. I was auditing the plant guy, and he also happens to be a marijuana manufacturer and smokes a little reefer on the side. Do I care if the plant watering guy's high? No, because he waters the plants real well, and he talks to the plants and cares for them. Okay, great. Accept the risk that the plant watering guy failed his drug test. Call it a day and move on. This is something that I have been pushing this last one is something I've been pushing very heavily at early warning. Federal and state law are different than security policy. Know the difference. Understand what the difference is and say, okay, you know what? State law requires me to do this. If you do not want to do this business, I need you to accept in writing that you are not going to comply with this particular federal or state law. I'll tell you, your lawyers will go running. They'll say, no, wait, we can't do that. We can't do that. Well, then we need money to comply to this particular issue. For corporate policy, hell, I'd love everything to be encrypted everywhere. I'd love to have IPsec mesh on every system everywhere and rotating keys every 5 seconds. I know that I've got a mainframe, and it doesn't do that. It hardly deals with authentication properly, RACF. But know the difference and accept where you can and cannot be non-compliant. And breathe in and out, because it's okay.